SJWs and their antics shouldn't even surprise me anymore. And yet, they managed to find ways to sink to new lows. This time, they got triggered by a body part of a computer-generated rendition of a fictional character. Imagine being so insecure that looking inferior to a cyborg that doesn't exist causes you immense butthurt. Now, to be fair, it's not easy for a pathetic creature of meat and bone to compete with a perfect machine. 10 points to you if you get the reference. But before we delve into the insanity of NPC film critique, I feel that I need to give a spoiler warning. If you haven't seen Alita, do so, assuming it's still in theaters. It's absolutely amazing. Easily the best movie I've seen recently, and I consider it one of my all-time favorites. This video can wait. Go watch the movie. Having said that, I'll try to avoid spoiling anything unless it's necessary. And yes, I know this topic has been covered by countless YouTubers already. You know me, always striking while the iron is lukewarm. Anyway, let's begin. Our first specimen is titled Do Female Cyborgs Dream of Breasts?
A good game poses a philosophical question. A masterpiece does it right in the title.
Well, at least the article didn't ask another pressing question. Judging by how Alita looked at Hugo, they probably do. Despite the title, this article doesn't actually focus exclusively on Alita's breasts. Nice to see that New York Slimes has degenerated into a clickbait tabloid. Nevertheless, it does dedicate way too much time to discussing this part of Alita's anatomy, given how short the article is. Let's see what this enlightened critic has to say.
At one point in Alita Battle Angel, another dystopian fantasy that reminds you of just how visionary the original Blade Runner was, the cyborg heroine gets a new body.
Whoa. Since when is this a good way to start an article? This is literally the first sentence. There I was thinking that my introduction was bad. Also, I'm not sure how Blade Runner relates to this. Sure, some shots might look somewhat similar, but otherwise the two movies have very little in common. Did you mention it because it's the only dystopian cyberpunk film you could name? Even Robocop has more in common with Alita, both aesthetically and thematically.
It's a streamlined shoulder-to-foot job, one that makes her look like a sex doll with a chrome-plated musculoskeletal system.
I am not a sexologist, but aren't sex dolls supposed to look like humans? So what you're saying is she looks human.
Her new physique turns out to be an innovative weapon and comes with articulated parts.
Of course her body has articulated parts. That's the point of a body. Without articulated parts, it would be a statue. And statues are hardly fit to be action movie protagonists.
A wasp waist and what looks like a discreet chastity panel for the groin.
No, that's not a wasp waist. That's a normal waist of a young woman who doesn't shove cheesecakes into her face every waking hour. And before you cry about fat shaming, I'm a lardess myself, so I can say that.
It also has larger breasts than the old model, a change that in a snort-out-loud line is pinned on Alita's own ideas about how she should look.
Well, if you paid attention, you'd notice that the old body was originally meant for a much younger girl, so of course it has smaller breasts. Duh!
If only someone here were joking, or had an idea about the construction of femininity. Why does Alita, who has a human brain, even have breasts? Why does any cyborg that isn't a sex bot a wet nurse?
It's just for decoration.
Why does Alita want to have breasts? I don't know. Why would a young woman want to have an attractive female body? It's not like she was dating a guy at the time. Oh wait, that's exactly what she was doing. Functional or not, her breasts do look attractive. And the fact that NPCs are so triggered by them proves that. But that's not the only reason. It actually amazes me that people manage to miss the obvious theme of retaining one's humanity, a theme quite prominent in the movie. Alita faces many adversaries who look progressively less human because they opted for prosthetics that are optimized for combat. This is paralleled by their apparent lack of empathy and other human traits. This isn't even subtle. Any idiot on the internet, myself included, can notice it. How come seasoned film critics fail to do so? The author rants about Alita's tits a bit more, without bringing up anything of substance, and then goes off on a tangent. The article as a whole is poorly structured and rambly, so I don't want to waste any more time on it. Next! Our exhibit number 2 is titled Alita has a design problem, but it's not the big eyes. Just like the previous specimen, this article goes downhill right from the start.
Alita, Battle Angel, brings Alita's big eyes to life in stunning fashion, making them look incredibly believable. But the movie fails to compellingly explain why her android body conforms to a sexualized ideal body type.
Let me stop you right there. There is a difference between an attractive character and a sexualized one. And is there anything to explain? I suspect that HWs would rather see Alita that looks more like Sarah Ryder. But normal people prefer good-looking characters. Not to mention the whole staying true to the source material thing.
It's here that Alita finally becomes the character from the manga, sexualized adult body and all, but the explanation the movie gives for why she looks the way is eye-rollingly bad. Ostensibly, Alita Battle Angel depicts Alita with big eyes and a sexualized ideal type of body because that's how the character looks in the manga.
Her body isn't sexualized. It's fit and athletic. Granted, this is what humans are hardwired to view as a perfect female body, for reasons that should be obvious to anyone who understands evolution. But that doesn't make it inherently sexual. Sexualization is more about behavior, body language, even speech patterns and intonation. You'd think that any fully functioning adult would understand that. Oh, right. We are talking about HWs here.
The filmmakers went to great lengths to bring Alita's uniquely large eyes to life. However, the movie never explicitly explains why Alita's eyes are so big. We do see in flashback that all the other androids had eyes like that, so it's part of their design.
Don't you love it when they answer their own question in the very next sentence? Also, what is this? Little Red Riding Hood? Goodness, what big eyes you have! Didn't anyone tell these people how impolite it is to ask others why their body parts are the way they are?
But Battle Angel goes to the trouble of explaining why Alita's herb body transforms from how she originally found it to a body with large breasts, a small waist, and an overall thin appearance.
They explain it, because otherwise it would be a puzzling scene that might leave audience baffled. Sometimes exposition is needed. If Alita's eyes changed their size, that would have warranted explanation as well.
The contrast between how the movie treats Alita's eyes, which are big just because that's the way she and the androids were designed, versus the body, which is given an actual expositional explanation, implies that the filmmakers knew they'd need to explain why her body became over-sexualized. The filmmakers knew they'd need to justify why Alita went from the muscular appearance of the original body to the sexualized feminine body it became in order to maintain the character's manga design, and their justification is ridiculous in its delivery.
The body wasn't very muscular to begin with, and it didn't even change much. It just went from being androgynous to feminine. In case it wasn't obvious, berserker bodies were designed with customizability in mind, and could adapt to both male and female users, as well as transform to fit the user's preferences. It also makes sense that Alita would like to look attractive. She was dating Hugo, and given how he reacted when he saw Alita's new look, it was clearly the right choice.
Rather than implicitly explain Alita's body looks how it does because it's how the androids were designed, similar to why her eyes are large, Battle Angel plays it off like this is Alita's own ideal warrior body, one with sexualized proportions and seemingly very little muscle.
They didn't say it was her ideal warrior body. There's more to her than killing people, you know. Funny how quick SJWs are to view people as one-purpose tools. Isn't this what they themselves call objectification? For shame.
Sure, we know Alita was likely programmed to believe that. But the way the movie depicts this scene, especially in the context of having established Alita as a free-thinking and rebellious character, having her conform to anyone else's ideal doesn't make sense.
I choose to believe what I was programmed to believe!
Stop writing fanfiction, will you? Nowhere does the movie state that she was programmed to believe this. As for conforming to anyone's ideal, how do you know it's not her ideal?
Further, it also doesn't make sense that any woman, human or cyborg, having the opportunity to transform their body into that of a warrior's, would enlarge her breasts and trim her arms, waist and legs.
Well, for starters, those aren't even very large breasts, so they wouldn't get in the way of fighting. Moreover, as I said before, combat wasn't the only thing she was planning to engage in.
For examples of how actual women think warrior women should look in media, just look to the redesigned She-Ra on Netflix's animated show, or the Amazonian warriors in Patty Jenkins's Wonder Woman.
The new She-Ra is supposed to be in her early teens, right? As for Amazonian woman, when I clicked the link, I was greeted by this image. Are those breasts? Breasts that are larger than Alita's, no less. Way to undermine your own argument. Bravo! Oh, and speaking of warrior woman designed by woman, have you ever heard of Bayonetta? I rest my case. The third steamy offering is titled Alita Battle Angel is a man's fantasy of a powerful woman, although the browser title says The Male Gaze Rules in Alita Battle Angel Cyborg Movie. You know we are in for a treat.
I wish Alita Battle Angel had been made by a woman. The cyberpunk action film inspired by Yukito Kishiro's manga Gundam could have been a game-changer in the way women, and specifically teenage girls, are portrayed on screen. A bounty hunter cyborg with the power to bring down toxic masculinity. Sign me up!
Translation: you wanted this movie to be man bad, woman good, because that worked so well for Ghostbusters 2016.
But alas, Robert Rodriguez directed James Cameron's pet project, and instead of a complex, vibrant female character, Alita is reduced to a wide-eyed young woman. Literally, her CGI avatar eyes are huge, who feels more like a male fantasy than a woman's idea of a hero.
Have you considered that the wide-eyed young woman is precisely the symbolism they try to achieve? Her naivete and hopefulness are accentuated by the way she looks, which is in stark contrast with the gritty and bleak setting.
The fact that a man gives this insignificant girl her words and identity is your first hint that this might not be the empowering movie it's been marketed as. And indeed, Alita is brimming with male gaze. I counted 4 women with speaking parts, defined extremely loosely. Alita, Ido's ex-wife, Kieran, and fellow Dr. Machine Wizard, who's now involved with Iron City top gangsta Vector. Nisyana, a killer cyborg and bounty hunter who threatens Alita. And Kiyomi, a friend of Alita's love interest Hugo, who has exactly one line. Because these women barely speak to each other, the film does not pass the Bechdel test.
Kiyomi has exactly one line, huh? So, did you miss the scene where she explains what ERM stands for? Or where she asks Tenji why he doesn't like Alita? Maybe you did just one line before watching the movie? Regardless, let me put on my fedora of patriarchal oppression and mansplain something to you. You spew out feminist buzzwords, but you don't even know how to feminist properly. Not only do you align yourself with a toxic ideology, you can't even do it right. First you mention male gaze, and then in the same paragraph whine about the Bechdel test. Those things aren't connected, Male gaze is about the visuals, not the dialogue. And speaking of the Bechdel test, you don't understand it either. It originates from this comic strip. So, on the surface, there are only 3 requirements. There have to be at least 2 female characters, they have to talk to each other, and they have to talk about something that isn't a man. Alita passes this test. But let's not stop here. Instead of focusing on the letter of the rule, let's think of its spirit. This comic strip was meant as criticism of a perceived trend in popular culture, where female characters were prominent only in relation to men, i.e. love interests, as opposed to having plot relevance in their own right. Don't you think that such criticism isn't applicable to a movie where the main character is a woman? Looks like someone was asleep in her gender studies class.
Why does Alita need a love interest?
She doesn't need a love interest. Just like I don't need to make a video about a stupid article written by a hacker writer. And yet here we are. For starters, Hugo was in the manga. Moreover, he serves to show Alita's gentler side. She's not just an unstoppable killing machine, but also a passionate, loving and caring human being.
He just slows her down, and from the moment they first meet, comically, he's framed as her savior, even if she can technically crush him with her pinky. He becomes her driving motivator.
Why do you sound like a bitter cat lady who is angry at the world for being lonely? Also, you just answered your own question. The romance helps to move the plot forward and provides motivation to the protagonist. It's called storytelling. Look it up.
But just what Alita wants, besides to be with Hugo and maybe remember what happened to her in her past life, is unclear.
Did you pay attention to the movie? She wanted to become a hunter-warrior. She wanted to stand up to evil, even when hopelessly outmatched. She is driven by her sense of justice and her desire to find herself. It's hero's journey in its pure form. Just go read The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell.
Plot aside, there's also an unsettling sexualization of Alita throughout the film. From the way the camera pans up her teenage cyborg body to a truly ridiculous moment where she grows large breasts because it's reconfigured for her imagined image.
You know, I'm starting to suspect that there's a secret mailing list, akin to Game Journal Pros, where these NPCs collude to push certain narratives. It's the 3rd article, with the same brainless talking points. Also, imagined image. Who writes like this?
This is fairly on brand for Rodriguez, whose body of work has pretty much coined the genre of badass fighter women who are also objectified hotties subject to men's whims.
If you paid more attention to the screen, you'd notice that Alita is never subject to men's whims. She is quite rebellious when faced with Ido's fatherly protectiveness. As for Hugo, she is into him arguably more than he is into her. She was the one purring on him while he slept, not the other way around. It's not being an objectified hottie subject to men's whims. It's called being in love. You should try it someday.
At some point, Alita is actually described as having the face of an angel and a body built for battle.
It's almost as if the movie is called Alita Battle Angel or something. Not to mention that you somehow managed to miss the obvious symbolism of someone who is too pure and innocent for this sinful world being called an angel. This isn't rocket science. Besides, this description is pretty accurate, so what are you even complaining about?
Through a series of flashbacks, Alita slowly figures out the key to her identity, but even that is more sad than fulfilling. The woman she used to be appears more free and focused on her own agenda than the woman she has become.
Sure, if by free you mean a soldier who follows orders. Alright, enough of this drivel. What's next on the menu? Now we get to the final article for today. And I've saved the worst for last. It's titled, "A Brilliant Film Ruined by Hollywood Unnecessarily Sexualizing a Character." Same shit, different asshole.
Why, when she is in full-fledged fighting mode, is Alita's body and costume so unnecessary sexual? Why is her waist impossibly tiny, her breasts so prominent, her eyes quite so large and doll-like? Why has she been sexualized and objectified like this in a film rated for teens?
Why is this article so retarded? Pictured: unnecessary sexual costume, impossibly tiny waist, prominent breasts. I have a question. Has the author of this masterpiece of shit seen humans, like, ever? What is impossible about this waist? In fact, one of my exes had a very similar body type. She could even bend in half backwards, just like Alita. Although I'm pretty sure she wasn't a cyborg. You cannot call it an impossible waist if there are actual living humans who have the same body proportions. That's the exact opposite of impossible.
I know the story is based on a Japanese manga series, graphic novels that can portray the human body in unrealistic ways.
Unlike Western comics, which are 100% realistic and anatomically correct.
But I don't think artistic and cultural homage provides enough cover here.
Sure, let's disrespect the source material by butchering it in an attempt to westernize it. Worked so well for Ghost in the Shell and Death Note.
We have simply got to stop portraying girls and women like this, even in science fiction.
Because you say so?
I would love Alita's body and costume not to be in the slightest bit important, but it is. Right now, we are worried about the way young people in particular view one another.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
They are grappling with issues of consent, power, and objectification, all thrown into sharp relief by things like sexting and the constant availability of pornography on smartphones.
Alita should have been made fugly because of porn on smartphones. Okay then, crazy lady, whatever you say.
Of course, I'm not drawing a straight line between the way Alita looks and these things happening. But I am saying that the mind-numbingly predictable portrayal of unnecessarily sexualized women and teenagers, even in mainstream content, contributes to a sense that they are objects and not beings. The #MeToo era tells us that this is a dangerous thing.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope. First they show Alita having tits, next thing you know, there are thousands of new Harvey Weinsteins running around. Thanks, Hollywood. There are several more paragraphs of this claptrap, but I'll spare you the boredom. Links to all articles are in the description, so if you feel like losing some more brain cells, you can check them out in their entirety. As for me, I've reached my cringe limit. Until next time, dear viewer.